Today's the big day. Log in Reg.
Oh,
he's out there?
He was.
Yeah, grab it. Thank you. Alright, so we're now recording. Login Reg happening. Today what we need to do is we need to create a different class. You guys can guess what that class is. What do you think we're going to build? So yesterday we did a movie class, right? Today, since we're doing Login Reg, what do you think? We're going to make a user class, right? Exactly. Okay. Cool. So I've got our project still open here. Let's just close that out there. So in our models.py, right now we've got our movie manager and our movie class. Let's go ahead and build a user class, right? Staring at his phone. All right. Okay.
You had a special request for him, but he's already aware.
The nerve.
Oh, it's because I texted him.
Oh, okay. You let him know.
Yeah.
All right. Very
That's
good.
why he said that, okay.
Yeah, he knows what's up. All right, cool. So what fields do we want to have for a user?
Email.
Let's do like first name, last name, right? All right. Car field. How long do we want to allow them? 255. All right, for some serious long first names. All right. Last name. Oops. Let me just duplicate this. Last name. All right. What else do we want to have? Email. Okay. Last time we discovered there was this email field, right? So that's not really sure what kind of change that would make in the data as far as the database is
Does that
concerned.
have like built-in validation? Maybe?
I don't know. I'm not sure that it does. Yeah, maybe it does actually. All right, but let's keep going. What else do we want to store for a user? So we got first, last, email. How are we going to authenticate them? How do we know?
Password.
We need a password, right? All right, fair enough. Car field. Whoops. Okay, and we're going to be using, when we do our passwords, we're going to be using this module called bcrypt, okay, to actually turn those passwords into something that just looks like kind of a letter soup, all right? And it's my understanding that bcrypt needs at least, or I'm sorry, it should need no more than 64 characters, I think. So let's just say max length of 64 on that. Okay. All right. Maybe we want some timestamps in there, right? Yeah, that'd be good. Okay, cool. That looks pretty good, right?
That bcrypt is already included in
You have to install.
the project.
Not yet, right? We're going to need to actually install that into our virtual environment. All right. So now that you mentioned it, let's just go ahead and do it since it's on the tip of our tongues here. All right, so our environment is already activated from yesterday. So what can I do to install bcrypt? You got pip install bcrypt. All right, done. That was easy. Cool. So we got this user model. But we also probably want to have some kind of validations happening with the user, right? So if I'm registering a user, we want to make sure of certain things like, did the user insert a first name? Did the user insert a last name? That kind of stuff, right? All right. So how are we going to create this validation according to kind of what we did yesterday? Anybody remember? Yeah, we created this manager class, right? So we'll have a class user manager, and then what's that going to inherit from? Models.manager. Okay. And then we also made a method inside of that. So what do we call that?
Basic value.
Yeah, just basic validator. I heard some different things there. Okay, so what does this need to take in?
So,
Self.
and post.
Yeah, and then the post data. Exactly. All right. And then inside there, if you guys remember, we created an errors dictionary. Remember that? So we just say errors equals this empty dictionary. And then what we did is we ran through the fields one by one and figured out, do we have an error for this field, right? Okay. So let's kind of start the logic. We want to start with first name, right? So if len of post data first name, all right, do we want to set a length requirement other than one character? I'll leave that up to you. Okay. So if it's less than 2, then. All right. If it's less than 2. We'll say errors at first name equals please enter at least 2 characters for your first name. Okay. All right. I'll probably do the same thing for the last name, right? Let's keep it simple. Last name down here. All right. How about email? What do we want to do there?
Change the error to say last name instead.
Yeah, I should. Nice. All right, good. So we want to validate the email as well. In the platform, they give you some code to do this using a regex, I believe. Let me just double check it here. Pattern validation. So if you look at this section here, they'll give you this little regex, right? So basically here what we're saying is if this regex does not match what we took in through the form, then we'll say no, that's not an acceptable email address, right? Okay. I'm going to do it a little bit differently because Django has this built-in function called validate email. So let's just use that. Okay. So up here, I'm going to import, and I made a snippet out of this because it's one of those things where I forget where it's coming from. Okay, so from Django core validators, we can bring in this function called validate email. All right, now down here, what I can do, kind of similar to what we were doing yesterday, we did this try except block. So if we try to run this validate email function against the email that the user gave us and it fails, what do we know?
It didn't meet the criteria.
Yeah, it's not a valid email as far as Django's validator is concerned, right? So let's say if actually no, sorry. This is going to be try except, right? So we'll say try and then we'll go validate email. Whoa, what the? That's what I get for creating a snippet. All right. So what we want to pass in is going to be the post data email, right? Okay, and then if this fails, what I want to do is I want to set an email error, right? So I'll just add it to my errors dictionary. And I'll say, please enter a valid email. Okay. Now the other thing that we need to validate is potentially the password, right? Because we want to make sure that they, well, maybe a couple things. We want to make sure that they give us a password, number one. That's required, otherwise how are they going to authenticate, right? What's the other thing that we want to make sure? If we do like a verify password field, you guys seen those? As annoying as they are. Because then it's like, what did I just type in there? You've already forgotten, right? Okay, so let's say we've got a password and a password verification. So we'll say if length of post data password is less than, what are we going to require, like 8 characters or something? Does that sound good? All right, errors whoops, equals, please enter a password of at least 8 characters. Okay, and then finally what we want to do is we just want to check, did the password confirmation match what they gave us for the password, right? Okay, so if post data password does not equal post data at password, or we'll just say pw confirm, then we'll say errors at pw confirm equals please ensure that your password matches the confirmation. Okay,
Sorry, quick question.
sure.
So, the first error email, that's the key that we're creating. I'm sorry. So where's this link? Post data password.
Mhm.
Oh wait, sorry. So
Right there.
actually before
Line
that, so
47.
errors email.
Oh, okay.
Is that a key that you created?
Yeah. Yeah, so when we say errors and then we put this key inside there, that's saying I'm either going to create this key value pair if it doesn't currently exist in the dictionary, or if this key exists in the dictionary, I'm going to overwrite the value with this.
And then the
Okay.
email, we created it, or was the email the name in the email input?
Yeah, that's coming from the form input
Okay.
from the website. Yeah. Okay. All right, no problem. So now that we're done with all this, what do we need to do with that errors dictionary? We have to return it back, right? Okay, to whatever code was calling this function or method. Okay, cool. So right now in our views, actually before we do anything else, what do we need to do now that we have this new, we've got a couple new models in here. And let me add we have to add this to the user as well, right? Do you guys remember how to do that? So we'll say objects equals, and then what?
User manager.
User manager. So we're creating a new instance of the user manager class, right? Okay, cool. So does our database know about this stuff yet? Not yet, right? So what do we need to do?
Make migrate.
Got to make the migrations, right? So let's say Python manage.py make migrations. Okay, done. Python manage.py migrate. Oops. Okay, done. Cool. So let's run our server. Run server. Okay. Cool. So now what we had initially is we just have one page and then we have this form processing for movies, right? Something like that. So what I wanted to do is let's move our index now. This would be more like a dashboard, so when the user gets there, you know, they could see movies or something like that. So let's create some different URLs here. So our main route. Is this not exciting enough for you guys? What's going on?
It's early.
Riveting, yeah, I'm sure.
Morning.
Man, all right. Let's create a route for the dashboard. All right, fair enough. That'll be riveting. if I could spell it. All right, so let's say views.dashboard. Yeah, that would be good to put in there. Thank you. Okay, cool. But we have an issue, right? Because we don't yet have a function that would handle a dashboard. All right, fair enough. So let's go to our views, and let's make this our dashboard, right? All right. And since this is a login reg demo, what do you think I'm going to have my index be? that's where we'll have our login reg form, right? So that's where a user can log in. Okay, cool. So we'll just say return render request, and then I'm going to render. Actually, do we want to change the name of that? All right, we'll say index.html, and then this one will change to dashboard. Okay, so inside my templates, I'm just going to change this guy to dashboard. Okay, and then we'll create another index.html, which will house our login and registration form. Right? So like this. Good. We'll do a little h1 in here. Login reg. Excitement. So I've got a form here. The first form that we're going to do is going to be, we'll make that the registration form, right? What do I need to put inside this since it's a form in Django? I heard some people say, yeah, good. CSRF token, right? Okay. So let's give this form some kind of an action, all right? What do you think, what action would make sense for this? Yeah, so we'll be going to a route. What route should we do, you think? I'm thinking just register, right? Like a post request to register. Or maybe another thing that we could do is we could do a post request to users, because that means almost in a way that we're creating a user, right? Let's do that. So we'll make a post request to users. I've got to add in the method, right? Post. Okay, cool. And then we need some inputs, right? Man, long week already, huh? Okay, input group. Okay, and let's do last name. Last name. Okay, then we've got email.
Input group is a snippet.
That I created, yeah. Yeah, I'm actually going to turn that into a type of email. We'll kind of see what that may or may not do for us in a little bit. All right, and then we also had those password fields, right? So password, password. This type will be a password. You guys know what that's going to do to the input? Encrypt it. Yeah, it's going to look like little bullets, right? Cool. Group here, and then we'll do password confirmation. Again, that would be a type of password, and then we'll say this is PW confirm, right? I think that's what we said. Okay, and then down at the bottom, let's just drop a little submit button in here. Okay, save that guy. Let's see if our form is showing up yet. Localhost 8000. It is indeed. Login reg. Yes, it is, isn't it? All right, so let's say there's an H2 down here just saying this is our register form. Okay, and then I want to have also a login form on that same page, so I can actually just grab some of my code here and tweak it. So let's say I just want to duplicate this form here, bring that down there, change this to login. And I'll also change the action, right? Because we don't want these both going to the same route. So let's send this to login. Okay, we'll take off all this stuff except email and password. All right. So pretty solid. We've got our register and login. Potentially, we're going to have some errors with these things, so I may want to start, like creating a loop up here for our errors.
Little libraries inside the inputs, like in the first name, the password,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Like do those things do like different things within it?
So I use this thing called LastPass to manage my passwords because I don't want to have to remember, hundreds of passwords or whatever. So all that's doing is it's saying, do you want to, if you press this, it will help you generate a password for it. Okay, but if you don't have that extension installed in your browser, you won't see that stuff. All right. So let's just kind of loop through some errors that we may get up top here, right? You guys remember how we do that? Anyone remember looping?
Yes.
Okay, awesome. Tell me how to do it.
You could use
I heard it for.
four.
I can use
Messages.
I can use 4 or 4. Is it? Okay. For message in messages, right? Something like that. Okay, and then we need to end it, as always. And then inside that, what I'm going to do is I'm just going to print out, we say print, but I'm going to have it substituted into the template, right? So we'll say P, maybe I'll say style, color red. Oh, Firebrick. I'm quite fond of Firebrick. Okay, cool. And then inside that, we want to output it. So again, we've got these double mustache tags, and we can just put the message in there, right? All right, so everything's good. We're still rendering. Now, we actually need to create the code to handle these two forms, right? So we haven't done that yet. In fact, I think we haven't even created the routes, right? So where do you guys want to start? You want to start with the URLs?
Sure.
Okay, let's do that. So over here in URLs, I'm going to have a URL for creating a new user, right? So that would be users, like that. And then we'll call this user or views.register. Okay. And then down here we'll have another one for login, and then we'll have that views.login. Okay, cool. So we don't have anything in our views, and you could see that we're actually getting an error down here, right? It has no attribute register, okay, because we haven't yet created that function. All right, let's create it down here. So we'll say def register takes in a request, and I'm just going to save a reference to the form data that came through. So request.post. Okay, and how am I going to get my errors? So I want to know if there's a problem when I'm creating a user, right? So if you guys look up here in the process function, how did we do that?
So they get added in the errors database. So if you print them out,
Well, let's be careful. It's not a database, right? It's a dictionary. So we're creating this errors variable, and then we're setting that equal to whatever gets returned from running our basic validator method, right? So we're going to do the same thing, only here we need to do it against the user class. Do we have the user class yet? No, so let's bring it in. Okay. So what we want to do is we want to do the same sort of thing here. So errors equals user.objects.basicValidator. And then what am I going to pass in there? Form. Yeah, exactly. Okay, so we can essentially grab this code right here, right? Are there going to be any issues with this? Sometimes you got to be careful when you're copying and pasting, so I just want you guys to be aware of that. It works the same way though, right? We're just setting some temporary messages that will be available for the next page view. That's all we're doing there. Okay? And then we would redirect to the index route because, again, the index route now has our login reg form on it. Okay? So what if we get past this? What are we going to do there?
Didn't we want to add the user?
Yeah, right? Let's do that. So say user.objects.create. And what are the things that we're adding here? So we're going to say first name equals form first name. Okay, I'll copy this down a couple times. We can change it. So instead of last name, I've got, that's going to be email. Okay, and then finally we have password, right? So what we're going to do before we actually go through the whole hashing process, I just want to make sure that we can save users right. Okay, and then we'll add the hashing part later on, as long as everything's working well. Okay, so password is going to be form password. Okay, anything else? I think that's all we have for a user, right? Okay.
Did you say we had to do something with the password?
Yeah, later on what we're going to do is we're going to hash it so that inside our database, if a person uses a password of, I don't know, password, something like that, we won't see it in the database that way. It'll be all hashed up. It'll just look like a long string of characters that means nothing. Okay. All right, but what we want to do after we create this user is we actually want to log him or her in. So how are we going to sort of keep track of a user in terms of our application? Session, right? Okay. So let's save a reference to this user that we created. And then how can I save that user's ID into my session? Ryan. Anyone want to help Brian?
Use the email?
You say user.
So we're just trying to save the user ID in the session.
So do you make the session and then, or like a session dictionary and you say user dot object?
So the session already exists, assuming that they've like visited our application.
Users in the dictionary. Have user ID in the dictionary.
Okay, yeah, but specifically, how do we add that to the session dictionary?
Oh, like session user ID key equals.
We're not in Flask.
Oh,
Request.
I mean, you're not far off. Okay, good.
You just forgot the request.
Yeah, so he forgot the request, right? So we have to say request dot session, and then I can set the user ID key to equal what?
User dot.
User dot ID, right? Okay, and then what else do we want to do? So once we've done everything basically. We've created this user, right? And then we've also set the user's ID in the session. What else do we want to do now?
Get that user with get ID equals user ID. And you can print out all his information.
What, like in the terminal or something? Is that what you mean?
Or so when you do that right there, don't you just put a number in? So do you have all the user's information or just his ID number?
Yeah, we have all the user's information. Yeah.
You
So
have
we don't
access-
necessarily like want to stuff the session up with a whole bunch of
Oh,
stuff.
okay. You have access to
But yeah, I mean, we could potentially kind of put whatever we want into it.
Oh,
I'm just going to put in the user ID. That way, if we ever need to find out more information about the user,
that's cool.
it's very easy, right? Because we have their ID in the session. Okay. So do we want to render anything out right now? Do we want to like render a page? No. Let's redirect, right? Okay. So where do we want to redirect to? To login? It's like
Endlessly.
make them log in again. Yeah, exactly. So I think we created this new route called dashboard, right? So if they make it to the dashboard, in theory, they should have been logged in already, right? Now, how can we make sure of that? We haven't created a dashboard function yet, but let's just create one real quick. So we'll say def dashboard takes in a request. How can I ensure that if you arrive at this dashboard, you are actually logged in right now?
If not in session, redirect.
Very good. So if what not in session?
If user ID is not in session,
Okay, not in request.session, right? Then we want to return a redirect to the index route, right? Because that's where we have our login reg form. Okay. We could also set an error message too if we wanted to. So how would we do that? So we could say messages dot. So remember, we brought in these messages up here. So we could say messages dot error. We have to pass in the request, and we could say you must log in first. Yeah, you shall not pass. All right. Cool. And then in our URLs here, I think we had views.dashboard going to dashboard, so that's cool. The only thing that we're missing, though, inside our views.py, as you can see, is our login function, right? We don't have that. So we could very quickly just whip that up. Let's just say def login takes in a request. I'm going to work on that later, so I'll just put a pass inside there, right? And now we're okay again. Our server's reloading. Everything's, the sky is blue, sun is shining, all that stuff.
Song, right?
What's that?
Song.
Mm-hmm. All right, so everything's pretty solid here. Should we try to create a user with some bad information, or like an empty form, something like that?
try to hack.
Yeah. Okay. So our validations are working pretty well. So if we put in like actually let me just put in a couple letters here. Okay, please enter a valid email because obviously our email is totally empty. Let's try changing this field here. Instead of type email, let's change it to type text. And that should allow me to basically put any kind of text in there, right? So, and then we'll just do like that as an email. So I'm still getting please enter a valid email. So it's at least validating even if a user tried to play around on the front end, right? Okay. So that's kind of one little distinction I want to point out to you guys is that there are two types of validation with forms. There's the front end validation, which is happening either in the HTML or with JavaScript, and there's the back end validation. Which one do you think is more critical than the other? The back end. Why?
It controls a whole lot more than just the front end.
Yeah, because there are a lot more ways to kind of get past the front end, right? I can make changes on the website like we just did right now. I can change an input type. I can potentially send a request not from the website if I'm using something like Postman. I could do all sorts of things. But the back end is like the gatekeeper, right? So if you get past the back end, you're in the database, potentially. So that's potentially problematic. We've got to make sure that if they get all the way to our database, their data needs to be valid, right? Okay, cool. So let's try creating a user. And actually, before we do that, we should probably have something rendering on the dashboard, right? So inside our views, if we got past this part, so if we didn't trigger the user ID is not in session, what do we want to do? Render the dashboard. Good. Turn render quest. Okay, main dashboard .html. What's the other kind of thing we could do? What if we want to, I don't know, address the user by first name or something like that? What would I need to do at this point? Well, yeah, I said we want to do that, but how do we do? Then there's the how, right?
Request.session.
Okay, so we need to get the user ID from session, and then what else do we have to do? Because I want the first name. I don't want the user ID to be on the page necessarily.
Assign a new
Yeah, so we need to go get that user, right? Okay, so how do I do that?
Equals.
So let's do this. Let's just create this key inside our context dictionary called user. And how am I going to get this specific user? So I know I've got his user ID in session.
This. Yourself.
No,
It's not self.
user.object.
Okay. Dot get. And then I can say ID equals what?
That's that session. Direct.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So then if I have the user available to my template, I could very easily output that person's first name, right? So if I open up the dashboard template here, let's say we just want to say up here.
Would that store the password in the session too? Technically?
No, it's not storing it in the session. What it's doing is it's making it available to the template. But we're not actually going to render it out on the template,
Oh,
right? Okay. So let's just do h1 hello, and then I want the first name. So how do I get that now?
User.
Dot objects. Why are we saying that? Careful.
You said first name.
Yeah, just user dot first name, right? That's all. Because I have a specific user that I've already retrieved, right, from the database. Okay. Put that there. Okay, now let's try to just go to the dashboard because we know that we're not logged in, right? Okay, so we got bounced out very quickly, and we got this message here that we were expecting. You must log in first. Okay, cool. Let's actually create a valid user then. So I'm going to come in here, see if I can meet all the criteria because they're pretty stringent, right? Oh, boom, we got in. We are logged in. All right, so that's pretty exciting. Got my name, so all of that code worked, right? I retrieved that specific user when we visited the page. What else might we want to have here? So if we can log in a user, do we also want to log them out too? All right.
Just make them delete the cookie every
Yeah, exactly. Like create the ultimate user experience. You can't log out.
That's a YouTube video.
Once you're in, you can't leave. It's like the Hotel California, right? Log out. Okay, log out. Okay, so I created this link to it. We don't have a URL for it yet, so let's just create that, right? So inside our URLs, let's just create another one, and I'll say log out, use.logout. This should be easy to write, right? Okay. Def logout request. What do we want to do in logout?
It's gonna clear the session.
Yeah, we could just clear it, whatever. Let's keep it simple, right? Session dot clear. Okay. And then what do we do after that?
redirect to the login.
Redirect. Good. Return redirect. We're going to go back to the index, right? So let's see if that works. So I'm here at my dashboard. I refresh it. I log out. Great. Now if I try to go back to the dashboard, okay, so we're good there. So now we need to create the functionality to actually log in, right? We're able to register, so that's good.
Or if
Mhm.
you hit that, will it still go to where you were logged in?
Oh, it's
It kind of depends. I think it would have blocked us, but sometimes if your browser has cached the page, yeah, test that on your own though. But-
It's not like it won't be able to receive new data though. It'll just show what you saw.
True. Yeah. I mean, if we actually tried to retrieve something from the database, that should cause a problem. So the user should be blocked. Okay.
You get the user info.
Yeah, like if we tried to get the user, well, if they're no longer if their ID is not in session anymore, then that shouldn't work, right?
Unless it's displayed as
2 redirects back to back.
2 redirects. What?
Looping
Like, it's like,
redirects.
if you hit back, it'll just redirect you again.
That's smart.
All right.
What happens if you have 2 routes that
Poor man's
redirect to each other?
Security.
2 routes are yeah. You'll probably get and I've come across this before. Your browser will say something like too many redirects.
Oh,
It will actually show that error on there.
okay.
Yeah. Okay, so what we want to do is we want to be able to log in. So this method that we had here was just kind of a stub. We haven't done anything there. So what are we going to get from the form here? The form is going to give us the email and the password, right? So how do I find out if that user even exists in our database?
User objects.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean you're on the right track, and then what?
Filter.
Yeah, so that's one way. So we can do, so there are two kind of ways that we can do it. We can either filter, which means that we would get what kind of data type there if we do a filter.
Query set.
A query set, right? Okay, good. What if I use get? What would happen then? Okay. If it exists, yeah. So if it doesn't, then what would happen?
It'll throw an error.
It'll raise an exception. Yeah. So what we could do, I'm probably going to do it like that. We'll do it as a try catch. So if we get in the catch block using the .get, that means that user doesn't exist in the database, right? Okay. So we'll say try, and then we'll say user equals user.objects.get, and then what are we trying to find by?
ID.
No. Because the user's not logging in with an ID. They don't even know what their ID is, right? Yeah, we need the email. Yeah, exactly. So let's say email equals form email. Okay. Okay, so if we get an error on that, basically what we're expecting is, okay, that person wasn't even in the database to begin with, right? So we say except, and then what we would do is we would just, we'll return a redirect here. We should probably set an error as well, too, right? Something really generic. We don't really want to tell them what the problem was. Yeah, right? You don't want to say,
That email
hey,
was
that
closed.
email
Try again.
does not exist, so try a different one. So let's just make it something nice and generic. We'll say messages.error, pass in the request, and we'll say, please check your email and password. Okay. Okay, so if we got past here, what does that mean? So if we're on line 69, what do we know for sure? Yeah, that email actually exists in our table, right? In our users table. Okay, cool. So what would we need to make sure of at that point?
Now we need to see if it's a bot.
Hey man, we're not going that far.
Oh man, that's funny.
Check the password.
So yeah, let's check the password, right? Make sure that it actually matches. Okay, cool. So if user.password does not equal the form password, then basically we're going to do this exact same thing, right?
How did you get that not equal symbol again?
Oh, it's so I use this font called Fira code, and you have to turn on the ligatures inside your VS Code settings. So those two things.
That's equivalent to like the
Exclamation point equal.
Correct. Yeah, that's exactly what it
Is that
is.
what you're typing in and then it goes?
Yep,
puts
and
it-
then it actually makes it look that way. Yeah, kind of nifty. All right. So if we've gotten this far, if the password did match, so in other words we didn't trigger this, then what does that mean?
Redirect to the dash.
Yeah, that means we're good. We can actually safely log this person in. So what do we want to do before we redirect them, though? One small thing.
Save the ID.
save the ID into session, right? Because otherwise we'll try to go to the dashboard and we'll get bounced out, right? Okay, so request.session user ID equals user.id. Okay, and then we're going to do our redirect, as you mentioned, back to the dashboard. Okay, so let's try this. So here, if I go and just put in, I don't know, I'm going to put in the wrong password. Okay, so we're getting our generic message up here, right? Please check your email and password. Okay, let me put in the right email and password. So mt.com. There we go.
I thought your password had to be more than or I mean your email had to be more than 8 characters.
Not the email, the password had to be at least 8 characters. Yeah, and mine was exactly 8 characters. I made it password, by the way. Pretty sweet, right? Okay, so we're able to register, log in, log out. We've got all the basic functionality. So the only issue right now is that inside of our database, we're storing plain text passwords. Okay, so let me just show you what that looks like. We've got our, I need to refresh this. So down here we've got this new main user table here. And if I, yeah, you can see the password has not been hashed at all, right? So if someone were to get inside of our database, they have all of our users' passwords. Okay? I mean, the bigger problem is that they got into our database, right? But the fact that they have all of our passwords means that, hey, I see that Joe used this password here. Chances are they probably used that on some other site too, right? So now it's like just, everything's fair game. Okay, so this is where bcrypt comes in. So we installed that into our environment, and we're actually going to use this to ensure that we don't store our passwords like this, right? You don't want your database to look like this. Okay, so all we need to do, there's not a whole lot that we need to add to what we have so far. But what we need to do is when we're creating a new user, we need to hash their password. Okay, so we need to turn it into this long string that looks nothing like what it started out as. Okay, so let's import bcrypt.
There's no way to know if a company is actually
Oh,
doing
I
this, huh?
spelled that wrong. To know if they're actually doing what?
They're
Hashing
hashing your
password.
password.
One way is if you what is my password and email it to you, then they definitely
Yeah, actually, that's a really good point. If you say I forgot my password or whatever, and they send you back an email with your actual password, right? It's not being hashed. That means that it's being stored as plain text. Yeah, so that's.
Has that ever happened to you?
Yes, actually, well, there's one site, and I'm not going to call it out by name, but I noticed that I was able to use the same version of the password, both with uppercase letters and lowercase versions.
Oh.
So something tells me that something's not right with that. You know what I mean?
Probably context.
Yeah, exactly. So we've imported bcrypt here. So when we create a new user, what we want to do is hash their password, right? And it tells us here in the platform how we want to do that. I think we just need to encode the text string before we do it. Let me double check here. Yeah, so here if we're hashing the password, we have to encode the text that came through the form. And then we also need to include this, which will generate what's called a salt for the password as well. Okay? So the salt is making it so that if I enter the same password on a couple different occasions, like let's say user 1 registers, and then 5 minutes later user 2 registers, and they both use the same exact password, the salt will make it so that the eventual hashed password won't look the same. So even though they're both using the same passwords, they'll look different inside of our database. Okay, so let's just grab this. We're going to say hash pw. So when we create the user. So we'll say bcrypt.hash pw, and then we're taking the text from the form, and then we need to encode it, just like it had there in the platform.
Did you say PW or WP?
Oh shoot, yeah. Thank you. By the way, all right, and then we also need to do gensalt, right? Gensalt. Dang it. Close that off. Okay, cool. So let's try creating a new user, and we'll see if that gets hashed the way that we're expecting it to. So Linda, how about we create you, eh? That's okay. You don't want to be in my project? Oh, you're saying that's all right. Okay.
So right now you can't log in because the password is stored in plain text, but you. Well, actually, no, you can log in.
Yeah,
Because you don't check.
I can still log in because we haven't yet done this, but yeah. Okay, so let's do Linda. You're gonna have a password, but again, let's see if it looks any different inside of our database. So hello, Linda. And then here, if I go back to my main user, so check out Linda's password. Does that look anything like the word password? Nothing at all, right?
It looks like a password. It's really weird to me.
It looks like a letter soup, right? Just a bunch of letters and numbers.
Because you entered yours before the logic was in there, it's
Mhm.
still shown.
Still there, yeah. So we could obviously go in the shell and delete myself if we want to do that,
Or you
but
can hash your password in the shell. Right?
I suppose that's true. Yeah. All right. I don't know that I'm gonna bother right now, but but thanks for the idea. All right. So the other thing that we need to do, we need to change our login logic slightly, right? Okay. So we also want to make sure here, instead of just saying are these things the same, we need to use a different function, which is check password, I think. Or is it like check PW? Check PW, right? Okay. So with the check PW function, we're taking in whatever comes in through the form, and then we're also going to compare that to what the user object's password that we got back from the database, right? Okay. And then, what does this return? Does this return? Oh, it returns true or false, right? Okay, perfect. So it returns a Boolean. So let's say, we'll say if whatever this thing returns was false, then we'll do that logic, right? We're going to set the error and then redirect them because we know that it didn't work. So I'm going to say bcrypt check PW. And then what I'm passing in here is just going to be form password. And then I have to encode that again. And then what am I comparing that to?
User.password.
User.password, exactly. Okay, so that's good. So let me log Linda out. I'll try to log Linda in with a bad password, so l@m.com. Oh, sweet.
Oh, you have to encode the hash.
Oh, right. We need to encode the... Jesus. Okay, so we also need to encode the hashed password that we just got back from the database. Did it not show that in the platform, though? Why did they not put encode on the...
You put it in the bottom one.
Where?
The box below the first one.
Oh, down. Oh, yeah, you're right. Okay. Try it in the shell. Oh, you know what? I think maybe it's because if you're doing it in the shell, you don't have to encode it. What came back from the data? I don't know. All right, so let's do that real quick. So instead of just user.password, we're going to say dot encode that guy. Okay, let's go back here. Let me try that again. Okay, please check your email and password. Let's try to enter it in right. Okay, that's working. Cool. Any questions? Let's log in Reg. I'm spent. No, I'm kidding. All right, let's have thumbs on this. Want to see that thumb, Alejandro? Sideways, all the way sideways. You feel good about that, Kevin? I saw you watching your phone for part of that. I don't think that helped. Up, up. Oh, okay. Ooh,
I'm at an
Linda's
angle.
firmly
I'm at
sideways.
an angle.
All right.
So that is 75 degree, 60 degree, I don't know math.
Okay.
I have a question, but
90 degrees.
it's just about the validations
Mhm.
and how you can do one on a date.
Okay.
If you want to record that.
Yeah, let's address that later on.
45 degree.
Yeah, because we went a little bit long today, and I don't want to keep going. Any questions about what we did here, though? If not, I'll just really briefly cover what we did. So the first thing that we did, of course, is that we created these two forms, right? And we had to have the forms routing to two different places. So I have a login route, and I've also got a register route, right? Now, when we go to the register route, we did some validations for the user to make sure that they entered in the types of things that we wanted them to enter, valid email address, that they had first name, last name, and so forth. And then what we did is we hashed their password before putting them into the database, right? Okay. And then when we want that user to be able to log out, we simply just clear the entire session. Now, as you guys mentioned, there's another way that you could do it. You could also just pop off the user ID from the session. Okay, so you can like leave the session active, but take the user ID out because that was the only thing that we were storing. Okay, on the login route, we had a couple steps. We had to see, does that email exist in the database? Okay, so if it doesn't, they're out, right? Then the next thing we do is we want to check and make sure that that hashed password matches the hash password that was in the database. And if those things match, if they get past that final check, they're good. And we have to do what with their user ID? Kellis, what do we have to do with their user ID once they've successfully logged in?
Storage,
Inside what?
database,
No.
the session.
Session, right? Yeah, exactly. That way when we get to the next page can find out who is this user, right? Remember we were doing the first name? So that's how we did it, is because we have their user ID in session, we can use that user ID to go grab that specific user and put his first name on the page. Okay? That's pretty much it. Any other questions, guys? No? All right. Back to work.